Underwear drawers are like the Wild West of wardrobes. You never know what pair you're going to pull out or what shape it's in. It's time to upgrade your underwear drawer with the buttery soft comfort of MeUndies. MeUndies' signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. Plus, it's breathable and oh so comfy, making it ideal for all-day wear. Get 20% off your first order plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/comfort. Enter promo code COMFORT. That's MeUndies.com/comfort, code COMFORT.
The life of a poor high school student is turned upside down when she starts dating a rich kid. Listen as we discuss anticlimactic proms, computer flirting in the 80s, and what parental abandonment has in common with quicksand. Then we'll find out if Pretty in Pink stands the test of time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time podcast. My name is Alan Noah, and joining me, as always, is the Ducky to my Andy, James Brief.
All right, so you're Molly Ringwald?
Yeah, I'm cool and super fashionable and very pretty, and you're the weirdo who's obsessed with me.
Yeah, the richest guy in high school is definitely going to go for you over me.
Aww. Maybe. Also, we don't know that Blaine is the richest guy in high school. That's debatable.
He's just a Richie.
God, I hate that word. I genuinely cringed when she said Richie. Come on. Do better.
Yeah, I'd actually never seen this film. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
This was my first time watching it as well. I saw that this movie was celebrating its 40th anniversary. I was thinking that we hadn't done a John Hughes movie in a while. And it is funny that we had done 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club very early on in the podcast, and then we just never got around to completing the Molly Ringwald John Hughes trilogy. This was the third and final movie that those two worked on together. So it was high time that we got around to Pretty in Pink. But for anyone who doesn't remember the movie, it's about Andy Walsh, a kind-hearted girl who lives with her dad on the poor side of town and struggles to fit in with the wealthier students at her high school. She has a loyal best friend named Ducky who has a secret crush on her. Blaine, a rich and popular classmate, asks Andy out. Ducky doesn't like Blaine because he's jealous and because he's bullied by the rich kids at school. Meanwhile, Blaine's friends, especially his pal Steph, thinks Andy is too poor to date. In the end, Ducky decides that Blaine isn't a jerk like the other rich kids, and he gives his blessing for Blaine and Andy to end up together. So when this movie came out 40 years ago, how did it do at the box office, James?
It was another hit. Molly Ringwald was very, very big in the 80s. And
Sure.
It was that Brat Pack era. I think Brat Pack was kind of like a negative term for them, but at least in 86, like a lot of these films are still doing very well. But this particular film, it came out in 1986, February 28th to be exact. It had a $9 million budget, so, decent for the 80s. And it opened at number one with $6 million.
Wow.
It was number one for 2 weeks, and then it wound up with $40 million domestically. So that's like almost a 7 times multiplier. It seemed to always be on HBO and like TBS or those kind of movies. It was everywhere. So I'm sure this film was another, easy, lots of millions for the producers.
Okay. Well, I was thinking because this movie is really all about Andy, we could talk about the movie by kind of filtering everything through her with her various relationships with the other characters. But I think we should start with how Andy views herself. And she considers herself poor. The other kids at her school consider her poor. We don't really get a very clear picture of this town. It's supposed to be suburban Illinois. I'm guessing it takes place in Shermer, Illinois, the fictional town where John Hughes set most of his movies. You can read more about Shermer in Kevin Smokler's book, Brat Pack America. But I was kind of imagining it that the way this one particular school district has been carved up, it's mostly rich kids and then a couple of poor kids. because Andy is definitely sensitive about where she lives. She doesn't want Blaine to see her house later in the movie. She lives in a house, though. Maybe this is my personal bias because I grew up in an apartment in a neighborhood where there were a lot of rich kids in huge mansions. But to me, a house is a step up from an apartment. Maybe there's not that many apartments in this town, but she lives in a house. She has her own bedroom. Her dad has his own bedroom. There's food on the table. There's a dog that they're feeding. She has a car. Now I look at it and I think that's a classic. Maybe then it was just considered too old. And yeah, there's a big dent on the side. But I felt like she wasn't as poor as she thought she was.
It's all relative because there's obviously the rich side of town and not rich side of town. You know, how poor was she? I mean, they're not destitute. And they didn't really play up the poorness like they couldn't eat. It was more like she couldn't have the fashion that the rich kids had.
The thing with the fashion is that, one, she uses that to fill in the gaps in her wardrobe because she can't afford to go shopping at the really fancy, expensive stores. It also seems like she enjoys it, you know, like thrifting and finding old clothes and then cutting them up and sewing them back together and creating new looks. I like that she likes it, you know, that it's not just a thing that she has to do, but it seems to be something that she really enjoys doing.
I knew that it would probably come around later in the film, but or the second I saw the dad's tacky pink dress that he bought her, I was like, oh, she's going to be able to fix it.
Right. She also has a job, which a lot of high school kids do, some because they need the money, some because they just like working. She likes her job, and we'll definitely get into Iona a bit later, but she lives with her dad. And let's talk about the dad and their relationship. So the dad is
Harry Dean Stanton.
Right. I see him and I think of Big Love, the HBO show where he was Roman, the patriarch that Bill Paxton's character had married into that family.
Oh, right. And that sect. Right. He was a great actor. He died, I think, about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. He has a job, but it's part-time, and Andy is pushing him to do more and get a bigger job. They end up having a big fight towards the end of the movie where he basically says that he can't go and look for a full-time job because he's sad that his wife left, and that was 3 years ago. I don't know, man. That A to B to C logic just did not work for me. I get it that you would be sad if your wife left you, but that means you can only work part-time and not full-time? You can't go to a job interview? I don't get that.
Well, I think the guy was just depressed. And I appreciated what they were trying to go for. And what I think they were trying to go for was a little bit flipping the script. Usually it's the dad abandoning the mom, and which is a little bit more cliche. Unfortunately, probably more, I don't know if it's more accurate, but probably. But he's a very loving father, and he really, really cares. And he's one of those dads that really regrets that he can't provide more for his daughter. And I do like him, but I think you're right. He's definitely held back by, it's what I would call depression. And then later in the film, she's able to be like, Dad, snap out of it. And that does unfortunately get the whole, like, you know, maybe a whole 80s thing that you just need to be a little happier and you could snap out of it. But she is right that he needs to move on from the mom. Like, she ain't coming back.
Sure. I feel like this was a thing that happened more in 80s movies where one parent would just abandon the family.
Yeah.
And that is different from a couple getting a divorce.
Absolutely.
It's like that meme about when I was growing up in the 80s and I was watching a lot of movies, I thought that quicksand would be everywhere when I became an adult. I think I also felt that a lot of parents just abandon their families. Not we get a divorce and you can come visit on weekends and we stay in touch and we see each other, blah, 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 blah. Just one day, mom or dad gets in the car, goes for cigarettes and leaves, and you never hear from them again. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen or that it never happened, but it just feels like that happened more often in movies than it did in real life, I think.
It does happen. Yeah, it does. But I agree with you that quicksand, kidnapping, the Bermuda Triangle, and parent, just random abandonment, did seem to happen a lot more often than I say it would happen in the general population.
Yeah, that's my point. But I agree with you. There are moments with the dad that are really sweet when Andy comes back from her date with Blaine and she's just so excited and he's talking to her kind of like a mom would or a friend would, and they have this really sweet moment together in the living room. And then he says, you know, I kind of hate that it's me you have to have these conversations with. And Andy says, she couldn't have said it any better. And they hug. I really like that moment. I thought that was really sweet. That was a very nice father-daughter moment.
Yeah, I kind of like the whole father-daughter aspect of this film. That's probably the storyline that I have no problem with.
Okay, well, let's move on to a character that is more problematic, Ducky. So Ducky and Andy are best friends. They've been best friends since they were little, but now Ducky is in love with Andy. My first thought was, when did you decide that you were in love with her? I think maybe he says that he's always been in love with her, but that can't be true. A little boy and a little girl as best friends when they're in kindergarten or first, second, third grade, they're not thinking about that. Maybe there's a quote unquote crush, but it would be very superficial.
I mean, I would imagine it's crush that evolves into, hormones and also best friend. And then what you think at 16, or how old are they? 16, 17, whatever they are.
Something like that.
I guess proms, they're probably seniors.
Yeah.
Sure, it's teenage love.
Yeah. But when we first spend time with Ducky, I thought he was gay. I watched this movie with Courtney and our daughter, and I think it was when he first said that he was secretly in love with her or he had a crush on her. My daughter said, wait, he's not gay? He seems gay. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing. He just kind of presents in that way. There was a reunion that they did, I think through Entertainment Weekly, and they asked Molly Ringwald and John Cryer and whoever was there, where do you think the characters are now? And Molly Ringwald said, well, Ducky would have come out a long time ago. And then John Cryer was like, oh yeah, he's at every Pride event, with the rainbow flag and whatever. So it wasn't just me and my daughter who thought that. That made me think, is it that he is really in love with her, or is it that he just is around this girl and he thinks maybe he's supposed to say that?
I think that is a little bit of speculation. I think
Sure.
maybe if the writer said something like that, or maybe the director.
It was written by John Hughes. He had passed away at the time of that reunion. My guess, based on the other things that John Hughes has written, is that he didn't write this character to be gay on purpose. John Hughes really could get in the mind of teenagers, male and female, which is impressive for a man in his 30s. But all of his characters are white and straight, and there's not much diversity there. So my guess is that wasn't his intent. But it's impossible to know.
This film was written by John Hughes. It was actually directed by Howard Deutsch. Mm-hmm. He directed a couple other famous films, Grumpier Old Men, the sequel, The Whole 10 Yards, The Odd Couple 2. He seems to do a lot of sequels to probably more successful films. So yeah, a lot of people attribute this to John Hughes.
Well, I mean, John Hughes was a writer and director, and some movies he wrote and directed, and some movies he was one or the other.
Like Home Alone.
Yes.
He definitely has his touches all over that, directed by Chris Columbus. But at the very end of the film, there's a little non-spoken part with a young Kirsty Swanson.
Christy.
And she basically smiles at Ducky, and she's credited as Duckette in the credits. That's interesting. And it's implied that they get together and maybe they'll hook up, which again does not mean he's not gay. I know plenty of gay people that definitely hooked up with girls, but I don't think it matters whether he's gay or not. He is in love with her right now, and maybe he's bi, maybe he's straight.
Yes, at the end he ends up with this girl, Duckette, Christy Swanson, but he just kind of is ready to move past his crush and then just become friends with Andy. And that's great. He makes the right decision by coming to that realization. But we don't see him have that realization. The movie tells us that he had a change of heart, but we don't see it. And I did feel like that was a little bit of a letdown because we do spend a lot of time with the character and you can feel bad for him. While we were watching it, Courtney was saying, "Oh, poor Ducky, it's just unrequited love." And I think a lot of people probably did have that kind of reaction to him, that it sucks. It sucks when you have a crush on someone and those feelings aren't returned. But you do want to see him evolve to the point where he can say, no, your friendship means more to me than those feelings. And the movie does kind of gloss over that. Also, it does kind of gloss over the fact that Ducky is kind of a stalker. When he's talking to Iona, the Annie Potts character, he says that if he likes a girl, he'll bike by her house every day, 50, 100 times a day. That's not cool. There's a moment when Andy is listening to her answering machine and there's a call from Ducky at 6:08 and 6:10 and 6:15 and 6:19 and 6:24. That's creepy as fuck. But it's not solely that Ducky is stalking Andy because they are friends. They talk every day. They hang out. She helps him with his homework and things like that. So I think their friendship is a little confusing to me, the viewer. Not that that should make it confusing for Ducky, the character, but yeah, he is aggressive with his feelings for her.
I agree with you, but I also think that it's a test of time thing. I think it was meant to be kind of cute. Maybe, and he's just like this eccentric guy, and it totally doesn't hold up. Like when you look at it there, because no, dude, like that's not the way to do it. It's one of those unfortunate things that didn't age well.
Absolutely. But let's move on to Ducky's rival in love, Blaine. First off, the way that Blaine flirts with her on the computer, it's not even eye roll worthy. It's like facepalm worthy. There's no way this could happen in 1986.
I totally agree with you. It is absolutely ridiculous when she's like, "Who is this?" And he basically sends his picture. The reality is it would have been a very, very slow had he been able to send a picture. It would have gone like one line at a time, pixel by pixel.
Right.
But I actually did exactly this. In 1997, I did this in the computer lab because I knew how to send like messages over our high school's like limited computer network. I sent like messages that would just like blank people's screens and go like, "Ha ha ha, taking over your screen." And people would go, "Ah!" It was a prank, but like, you could do that. But I couldn't send like pictures like he did, and certainly couldn't do that in 1986.
Right. Definitely not. But when Blaine and Andy do go on their date, he's kind of a jerk right out of the gate. He picks her up at work and he says, "Do you want to go home and change?" And she says, "I did." Like, don't say that to a girl ever. Assume that she's wearing what she wants to be wearing, or she'll tell you if she wants to go home and change. Then he insists on taking her to this party, and she says no repeatedly. She does not want to go to this party. He doesn't listen to her. He takes her there anyway. As soon as they get there, she's being stared at. She's gawked at. She's uncomfortable. There's every reason to leave right away, but he still doesn't leave. He takes her upstairs, and then they encounter Steph, the James Spader character. We'll get to him. We'll talk about him a little bit more. But his girlfriend is mocking her, and it's shitty. It's shitty that he brings her there. And I understand from a plot perspective why they do that, because then after they go to the club that Andy wants to go to, and that's where Ducky is super obnoxious to Blaine. So it kind of shows you that there's pushback from both of their worlds, from both sets of friends. Neither the richies or the poories, I guess, approve of this relationship. But I felt like Blaine wasn't really a sympathetic character. And then they hint that his parents are assholes and that his parents put a ton of pressure on him. But we never meet his parents. Andy calls the house. A woman answers. We presume it's his mom. She seems pleasant on the phone. She's like, "Oh, I'll take a message. Does he have your number?" she's not being an out and out asshole. I kind of feel like if we were supposed to feel bad for Blaine and all the pressure that he's under, it would have been helpful to see a scene with his parents being obnoxious, arrogant, rich jerks.
Yeah, and he's a real jerk to her when he ignores her phone calls. And then not only does he uninvite her to prom, but oh my God, the way he says it. Do you remember what he says?
Yes, he says, I asked somebody else to prom and I forgot.
Right.
He can't even look her in the eye when he's saying that.
Wow.
He knows he's so full of shit.
Yeah, it's she goes to another high school. She's in Canada.
Right.
Don't say that. Like, that's almost worse than being like, I'm not going with you and saying nothing. Like, that was so bad.
Andy's yelling at him in that scene. And that scene is powerful. You feel Andy's emotions. Like a week before we watched this movie, we did watch The Breakfast Club. And I'm not saying this as a negative thing that Molly Ringwald was bad in The Breakfast Club, but she's better in Pretty in Pink. She is a better actress. It's only 1 year later.
Her hairdo's not better.
Okay, fine. But in The Breakfast Club, sometimes she just comes across as over dramatic. And yes, that's how teenagers are. But there's a line between being melodramatic and bad acting, and it's not clear which side she's on. In Breakfast Club, in this scene in Pretty in Pink, when she's screaming at Blaine, tell me about prom, just say it, I need to hear you say it, you feel it. This is how a teenage girl would act, would yell, would scream, would cry. And she's right to be pissed at him. She knows he's full of shit. She knows he's going to weasel out of prom, and she's well justified to say, at least just tell me, at least just say it to my face. My friends don't approve, and that's why I'm not going to take you to prom. And he's too much of a coward to even say that.
I wish that there was a little bit more interesting part to Blaine's character. I mean, he's this rich guy. He's judged wrongly by Ducky as you're rich, therefore you're a bad guy. Because this is kind of a, Montague, Capulet, Romeo and Juliet thing. They're from different sides, and maybe they don't understand each other. But why does he necessarily like her, and why does he necessarily turn around?
Yeah.
I don't get the motivation why they like each other, other than they're an attractive couple, so that makes sense from that point of view. But yeah, I wish there was a little more to him, or maybe like more realization about why he was such an asshole. Or you're right, maybe there's a scene with a parent that he has to tell off a dad who was mean to him, and just because she's from the other side of town, Dad, I like her. That cliche thing.
I think you hit it on the head. We don't really know why he likes her. It does seem like he is trying to prove a point that he can date someone who's poorer than him. Cool, neat, but that's kind of using Andy to prove something about yourself. We don't really see why he likes her. We sure as shit don't have any reason to believe him at the very end of the movie when he says that he loves her.
And I will love you forever.
Yeah, I mean, I gave a lot of shit in our Love Actually episode about these characters who declare undying love for each other when they don't know each other and they've barely talked. I can give it some leeway here because he's a teenager, and teenagers don't really understand what love is. He's feeling feelings that he's never felt before, and so he's like, well, that must be love. It's not, it's hormones, but he doesn't know that, so fine, I'll give it a pass. But let's move on to Steph, who is, I think, supposed to be even richer than Blaine, and definitely more of an asshole, played by a young James Spader, not that young. He's definitely in his mid-20s, and he looks it. He does not look like a teenager.
Let me ask you, where did you first know about James Spader? Like, when did he first get on your radar? Was it The Blacklist? I mean, did you know before then?
I can't remember.
So for me, it was Stargate, that mid-90s film where he is this, shucks, like intellectual good guy. He's the nerd of the film.
Right.
Exact opposite of what he usually played. He was a douche. And what was the other? Wasn't he in the Andrew McCarthy other film? He was a douche.
Mannequin,
yeah. Yeah, it's like a year later and they're both 25. So
Right.
I knew him always as this nice guy, and then I see him as this smug con man in the office, and then he's this international terrorist or whatever he is in the blacklist. And you go back and he's always this douche in the 80s. And I think in this film, Steph is a one-dimensional bad guy. I think he's an 80s bad guy that happens to be played by a brilliant actor. He's fun to watch, but I mean, it's one-dimensional.
It's funny that you say he's one dimensional because in part, yeah, he's doing a William Zabka kind of a thing.
Exactly.
He's just the blonde bully,
Yeah.
and he's given off those vibes. But there is another layer to him because in the very beginning of the movie, he hits on Andy and gets rejected.
That's
and
true.
he's pissed about that. Then for the next 98% of the movie, he's just complaining about how she's trash, she's poor, she's vermin, she's beneath them, yada, yada, yada. And then at the very end of the movie, at prom, Blaine calls him out on it and says, I figured it out. The reason you're so mean to her is because you like her and she won't go out with you. And we know that that's true, but there's no way that Blaine could have figured that out. And it's funny because you said he's one dimensional, and there is this other kind of maybe dimension in there, but the movie really doesn't execute on it at all. And they could have made him a three-dimensional villain because he has these feelings for her and because he has been rejected and he doesn't really care about the fact that she's poor. Maybe he gives her an ultimatum. Maybe he says, you're going to go out with me or I'm going to tell everyone that you did anyway, or that we slept together. And that would kind of be a parallel to Ducky, because Ducky also gives Andy an ultimatum where he says, if you go out with Blaine, I won't be your friend anymore. So maybe there's just more of a push and pull with Steph. Maybe when Steph is saying that to Andy, Blaine sees it, and that's how he has that realization at the end. Maybe his girlfriend sees it. He's got that blonde girlfriend who's so mean to Andy. Maybe she sees it, and maybe there's a confrontation there. They could have done a lot more with Steph and made him to be a more interesting villain than they do, and it's frustrating because he ends up coming across as a one-dimensional character. You're not wrong to call him that by any stretch, but it's like they started flirting with the idea of making him three-dimensional and then just kind of gave up on it. Instead, he's just a douchebag with his shirt all the way unbuttoned at all times.
I do give credit to John Hughes that the names of all the characters in this film are pretty interesting. I mean, you have a girl named Andy, probably short for Andrea or something. You have, of course, Ducky.
Right.
Blaine, I haven't heard that name before. Steph, which is maybe it's Stefan or something like that, but it's more, I'd say more conventionally, more of a woman's name short for like Stephanie. And then one more character let's talk about, the character played by Annie Potts, and that's a character named Iona.
I do want to talk about Iona, but just one other thing about the names. Steph's girlfriend is named Benny. So there are a lot of gender ambiguous names in this movie.
Except for Duckette. That's pretty obviously a woman.
Sure. And Ducky's real name is, I think, Philip or something. I think at one point someone calls him Phil, and Ducky's just his nickname. But I appreciate that the names kind of are not conventionally male or female. But I do want to talk about Iona. I think she is my favorite character in this movie, played by Annie Potts. She talks a lot about how she's older than Andy and the other high school kids. And she is. She's about maybe 15 or so years older in real life. And she looks like an adult. It is kind of funny, though, because this is 2 years after Ghostbusters. In Ghostbusters, if you had told me that she was in her 40s, I probably would have believed it because, she just is the secretary character and, she's got the super high-pitched voice. But here, yeah, maybe she looks like she's in her 30s, but she feels very young. She works at the record store. She knows all about music. She's constantly changing her hairstyles, her wardrobe, her looks. She's just so fun to watch. And she's also just a great character because Andy does not have a mom living at home or, a mom that she could even talk to on the phone because it was an abandonment thing. But she has Iona. And Iona, as an older friend doesn't patronize her. She doesn't talk down to her when Andy's all up in her feelings about this boy that she likes. And oh no, she's worried that Blaine stood her up. And then after the fight where Blaine retracts his promposal, whatever, Iona is there for her. Iona listens to her. She comforts her. She hugs her. She's a really great friend. Really and truly, she is the person in this movie who treats Andy the best. She is so kind and so loving to her. Yeah, she is my favorite character by a long shot.
She is an interesting character. She definitely talks very freely to this teenager. Like, why doesn't she have friends her age too? Maybe there's more to her story too.
Fair, but I assume that she does. She's just talking with her young coworker.
That's true.
And then like Ducky is in love with her and he kisses her and she says he's a good kisser. And I was wondering, oh no, are they going to be a couple? No. At the end, she's dating a guy who is age appropriate for her. You know, she's not so pissed that a teenage boy kissed her, but of course she's not going to date him.
But I guess we got to talk about the ending.
Yeah.
So Andy, she's all dejected, and she's all dressed up in this beautiful dress that she had fashioned together from two other dresses, Iona's dress and the dress her dad bought her.
Right.
And she has no one to take her. And then she turns around, and who is there? The savior, her white knight, Ducky. It's a very, very sweet scene, and he's ready to take her to prom, and she's so happy because she has that feeling of like, I'm at my lowest, and then her best friend comes and saves the day when he wasn't supposed to, or rather she didn't ask him to in any way. Then they get to prom, and then Blaine is there. He tells off Steph, and then goes to Andy, basically says, I love you forever, and shakes Ducky's hand. Ducky shakes his hand. Blaine and Andy go off into the sunset, and Ducky gets a wink from Duckette, and, maybe they'll hook up that night. The end.
Right.
Now, of course, we have to talk about the original ending that was apparently booed very, very much by the audience, that wanted more of a supposedly like a Cinderella ending where the poor girl ends up with her rich Prince Charming. She did end up with Ducky.
Right.
And apparently that tested very, very poorly. So they had to reshoot it, and then they even threw in the Duckette part.
Right. And apparently there is no footage that still exists of that original ending. It's not on DVDs or anything. Paramount lost it, apparently. I am curious about it because I've read different things. Some things that said she ends up with Ducky, and some things that said Blaine goes off, he leaves, and then it ends with Andy and Ducky dancing at prom. And if they're dancing as friends, that's a very different thing than Andy and Ducky hooking up. I don't think she should end up with Blaine. I don't think she should end up with Ducky. I think she should realize that both of these guys are not good relationship material. And if she rekindles her friendship with Ducky and they remain friends and they hang out at prom and they dance and, fast dancing and having a good time, I think that is a much better ending. If it ends with them slow dancing and kissing, then I don't think it's much better. I think it was Molly Ringwald who said, if Andy and Ducky end up together, it's saying that poor people should only date poor people and rich people should only date rich people. And that's not a great message. Yeah, sure. I agree with that. But I do feel like kind of specifically from a test of time perspective, the ending that modern audiences would want would be Andy to show up to prom as an independent woman. The line that she says beforehand is great. She wants to go just to show that they didn't break me. Whoa, that's powerful. That's empowering. Good for her. And yeah, I want her to go to prom and have a great time with her friends and then go home. And she doesn't need a guy either way.
That's fair, but it also leads another problem I have with this film. I feel like this is one of those films that contributed to the idea that the prom is going to be, it's like the most important thing. If you don't go to it, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. And I remember panicking. I didn't go to my junior prom. I didn't have a girlfriend. And then I didn't have a girlfriend senior year either. And then I met this girl that would become my girlfriend in the end of winter of my senior year. So then, oh, thank goodness I had a date for prom. But I remember thinking oh my God, if I hadn't met her, what would I have done for prom? And Going to prom, it was so mad, so overrated. It was just a dance. And I remember it cost so much money that I worked for all that money. And it was just so not worth it. We went to the place, we rented a limo, then basically we went home. For me, it was very meh.
I think that's fair. I didn't go to my prom. Unlike what Iona says about you'll always think that something is missing later in life, I feel like my life has turned out just fine having not gone to prom. Yeah, so what? You go, you don't go, whatever. I hear you. I think that many movies just put a lot of emphasis on it. I think just because it is an event at the end of high school, so it just kind of lends itself to the setting of your act 3 climax if you're doing a high school movie.
Right. But what do you think about 1986's Pretty in Pink? It's 40 years after it came out. Do you think Pretty in Pink stands the test of time?
I have some problems with this movie. I do hate the ending. It gets under my skin. I understand that John Hughes had to do it. Maybe he made peace with it, whatever. I hate how there is not a single person of color in this entire high school. I do, though, think that this movie does capture a lot of what John Hughes did really, really well, which is get into the minds of teenagers to understand how they think, how they feel, how they talk, and presenting it on screen in a way that feels genuine. It feels real. I understand everything that Andy feels. I get it. She feels like a real fleshed out person when she's sad, when she's being bullied, when she is hopeful about her future with Blaine, when she's angry at Blaine, when she's mad at Ducky. She goes through all of the emotions, and I felt like I was right there with her. I think that speaks to the strength of John Hughes' writing and the strength of Molly Ringwald's acting. And I do feel like all of these themes, they do stand the test of time. A lot of the fashion does not, but so much of the class stuff, the rich kids versus the poor kids, that absolutely stands the test of time. It is trite. It's kind of a cliche way to frame a Romeo and Juliet kind of story. The poor girl's in love with the rich boy. You can find a million movies and TV shows that are about that same kind of thing, but there's a reason for that. Kids feel it. Even though it's not their money, it's mom and dad's money, kids can tell the families that have more money, and it affects them. It affected me when I was in high school. I had a huge chip on my shoulder because I knew that I came from a family with less money than a lot of my rich classmates. That pissed me off. I drove to high school in a 1984 Pontiac Firebird. That was in the year 1997. It was a beat up piece of shit. And the rich kids in my high school looked down at me. They looked down their nose at me in my piece of shit car because they all drove brand new BMWs and Mercedes and Jeep Grand Cherokees that their parents bought for them the second they got their license. I told my mom I wanted a car when I got my license. She said, great, get a job and buy yourself one. So I did. And yeah, I held a grudge against those rich kids in my neighborhood. That is a problem that persists. It very much stands the test of time. So yes, I'm going to say that the movie does stand the test of time. Just one quick thing that also stands the test of time, the soundtrack. It was a huge hit in the 80s. The movie is named after the song by the Psychedelic Furs. The version on the soundtrack is a re-recorded version, but great song, either version. And Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark wrote If You Leave for this movie. It was a last minute thing because there was a different song by them for the original ending when Andy ended up with Ducky. Then they changed the ending and they had to come up with a different song that would more fit the ending with Andy and Blaine. And they wrote that in 48 hours. Great song. The Smiths are on the soundtrack. It is a great soundtrack. Just had to mention that. But what do you think, James? Do you think the movie stands the test of time?
I had a different take of this film. I thought the film was perfectly fine. My biggest problem, I think, with the film is it's weird, but I think it's Blaine.
Okay.
I want the two people to get together, and I really had no interest in the two of them getting together.
That's fair.
I didn't find much chemistry there, so I wasn't very satisfied by the ending. I really liked the relationship of Andy and her dad. I did like the relationship of Andy and Ducky. And Steph was fun enough. James Spader is always fun. I just didn't really like how it wrapped up because I didn't like the characters that wound up together.
Yeah.
Ducky would be better, but I thought Ducky getting together with her would also be kind of lame too. Because I thought like, nah, she should just be like, she should be best friends with him, and Ducky should get with like a duckette. That part's fine, I guess. I didn't think Steph got enough of his comeuppance, but for me, I'm actually gonna say I don't think it stands the test of time. I like the film most of it. I agree with you. Molly Ringwald's nice, and I like Harry Dean Stanton in it. John Cryer is very funny, but it wasn't that great for me. So that's a no for me.
That's fair. Honestly, I said yes in spite of the ending. I totally agree with you that the ending is unsatisfying. I'm kind of doing the headcanon thing where I'm imagining what happens after the movie ends, and Andy and Blaine date for, I'm going to go out on a limb and say 2 weeks. And that's it. And it's still a meaningful relationship in their lives. It's important to them, but it doesn't last. She and Ducky remain friends. I am going to go with Molly Ringwald's explanation that Ducky does eventually come out and they remain friends long into adulthood. I think thinking about it like that does kind of help me like the movie more. That, yeah, she ends up with him temporarily. What's important is that she shows up to prom alone to spite everyone else, and that she knows that she's strong enough. Also, by the way, saying showed up to prom alone made me think of it. When Ducky is defending Blaine to Andy, he says, Blaine showed up to prom alone, so he's not like those other rich kids. How the fuck does Ducky know that Blaine showed up to prom alone? He could have had a date there. Ducky arrived with Andy. He wouldn't know.
All good points. I think you and I had a kind of a unified idea that we both kind of liked a lot of parts in the first couple acts, and then it was whether or not the third act broke you or not of liking the film. For me, I think there's a lot better romantic comedies and romantic teen comedies that are more satisfying for me.
Okay. But that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about Big Mama's House, starring Martin Lawrence. I have never seen this movie. You must have seen this movie.
I might have seen this movie in the theater.
The word might is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
I either saw it in the theater or I saw it on a Blockbuster DVD rental.
I'm going to say that you definitely 100% saw it in the theater. But until then, we want to hear from you. We are at Testing Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Hey, we have passed the 500 episode mark, and you know what would be great? Writing a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps people find the show.
It does.
Give us 5 stars. Write something really, really quick. It can be one sentence, one line. It can be something quick and short and easy, but it does help people find the show. It boosts us in their algorithm ratings, whatever. So if you don't mind, we'd appreciate that. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone.